We are into the latest episode of the Fill the Gap podcast. I said last episode that I would get better about knowing what episode we were on, and I've done 3 in the last 4 days, and I don't know. I think I'm in the 20s, maybe in the 30s. But either way, I'm with my good friend. Actually, Brian, we've known each other for I was 18, so I turned 32 in a week. So what's that, 14 years?
We were just kind of talking about it. I think 08 was your freshman year.
09.
Or redshirt, or 09 was your redshirt freshman year, and that would have been the first year that we met. So yeah.
Yeah, so good friend, basically like a brother. Seen him naked. Brain Heath. Brain Heath. We played football together at Sacramento State. He's one of the founders of Helios, a distribution company here in California. What's up, man?
Dude, thank you so much. I gotta say, I've been watching the clips and.
But not the full podcast.
But not the full podcast, admittedly. Which terrible friend of me. But dude, I've been looking forward to this. Kind of selfishly, admittedly, just dude. I hope he picks me. But no, it's good to be here in a living room I've spent many hours in, and I don't know if the look on your face there.
Well, I was gonna say because you haven't listened to the podcast, but we've had so many of those conversations together, right? Yep. So it's we come from not necessarily similar backgrounds, but the last decade of our life has been very closely related, right? Working together, working out together, growing together as men. You've been to fitness events that I put on, a ton of stuff. But anyways, before we get into it, the podcast is sponsored by Cuts Clothing. I'm wearing a Cuts hoodie. Brian is wearing a Cuts shirt. And the reason why it's sponsored by Cuts is the best, we'll call it, for the sport of business clothing for men. Easily, not even without a question, for men. They just rocked out a women's line as well, too, on March 3rd. This podcast will definitely come out after March 3rd. They're dropping the Aeroflight series, which is what's that face? Which is the airport travel, tracksuit type of series. Yeah, It looks pretty fucking dope. So I'm excited about it. But anyway, they make the best stuff, men and women. Use code TheCodyAllen. You get 15% off. Support the podcast, support me, and you get yourself a kick-ass pair of clothes. So back into it. So Brian, fill the gap. The name derives from my days playing football, really our days playing football.
We met in the gap quite a bit.
Right. You literally just bragged yesterday about how you used to kick my ass, even though I was an 18-year-old boy and you were 22.
Yeah.
Which is funny. Actually, you are the first person that I've had on the podcast that can actually kind of corroborate my story, and I'm not here bullshitting, right? So for me, coming into Sac State specifically, I like most people, and I want you to touch on your story, because yours is different than mine, coming from your Del Oro kid, right? You and your brothers, faces plastered all over the school and in the town of Loomis that you grew up in. But you can kind of relate in the standpoint that when you're at the top of your senior year and you end up playing Division I football, you're generally one of the best guys, if not one of the best guy on your team, right? So that was me. I was the best quarterback, safety. I was an all-league kind of player. And then I got to Sac State, moved positions because of my physical capabilities, right? I was more geared to play linebacker. And you probably don't remember the time, but it was very significant in my life. I went from being the best player in Sonoma County to what I felt like the worst player on Sac State's roster. I was the first person to commit. So before Mo, before Jeff, before all of these other players, they offered Cody a scholarship. They're this guy is our top athlete on the board. I committed. Coach O looked me in the eye, Coach Spurbeck, and he's like, hey, we want you to play there. So with that honor also came a lot of responsibility, at least I felt. And my first week at camp, I was getting knocked on my ass. I was getting pancaked. I'd never played linebacker before. So the self-doubt that came into my mind, the imposter syndrome that I feel now as an older adult that I learned how to get over, all of these different feelings, failure, a ton of different emotions and feelings that you kind of just have to deal with, especially on your own, right? Mm-hmm. Because you being a senior, you look at all these freshmen come in and you're like, hey, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but hey, how are these kids going to be role players to help us win games this next season. I don't really care about their full career here. It's like, how are you going to help me this season? Mm-hmm. And I felt in a lot of ways like the beginning of that year, I didn't have anything to value. I was like, fuck, man, like, am I going to lose my scholarship? All this kind of shit. Anyway, long story short, I ended up getting red shirt of the year because I worked my ass off, just fucking. Yeah, you did. Found out what I was very good at, and that was studying my playbook, working harder than anybody else, and figuring it out. But what was your path from high school to Sac State to college, Division I football like throughout your career?
Dude, well, very similar in the sense where you're switching positions, and I think even going back a little bit is that perspective. And I may be jumping a little bit forward here, but like as men, we have this ego attached to us, and that perspective, like when you're first kind of challenged in a real, like, serious way, when someone asks you to switch positions, and especially for you, it's intimidating being safety quarterback, even though, people look at you now, they'd be like, no way he was ever smaller than what he was, or like couldn't compete or physically, oppose someone else. But dude, when you first came in, you were a small linebacker. Yeah. But you had the guidance of great linebackers ahead of you. And I think that's one thing that, like, kind of was saying as perspective is, like, when you get to that senior, you look back at those freshmen who are like dealing with this crisis, like of switching in a position or something. You're like, hey, just chill, dude. Like, it's all going to work out. Like, you're going to gain weight. You're going to get bigger. You're going to get stronger. You're going to get faster. You're going to be just fine at linebacker. And they want you to succeed. So if you're good at it, like if you're at least succeeding or improving, like maybe you're good enough to be a safety. Maybe you're good enough to be an outside rush. And they'll switch you and they'll put you in the best position to win. And to that point, my personal story, so, I mean, if you want to go way back, like I wanted to be a quarterback. Still to this day, like I throw the ball, like when we're out there, I want to huck the rock. I want to, like, get back there, play a little quarterback.
And is that a personality thing, right? Because being a quarterback is generally associated with being a dick, right? You want all the notoriety. You want to be the A player, right? Yeah. So like opposite of me, and I'll let you finish. I didn't start playing football until I got to high school. And I played tailback, and the varsity coach halfway through my freshman year was like, you're going to play quarterback for us. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't want to play quarterback. I want nothing to do with being quarterback. I was a shy kid. I got no brothers, unlike you. Like, I've never been in like I was never a competitive person, right? So I didn't want any part of that. But it sounds like you have been fighting for the spotlight your whole life, and you probably took that on and wanted that.
There's definitely a little bit that attributes to like my personality, growing up like just a Steve Young fan, and I definitely like wanting to be in the spotlight. And with two brothers, like I think being the oldest brother's kind of the one that wants to be the one dishing out the rock, wants to be the quarterback. I think that's kind of the natural progression, unless you're an older brother where like your biggest inspiration is a receiver, and then you like teach your younger brother to throw it around. Like, I guess that's probably like how a Manning situation ended up, right?
But you guys were all athletes.
Yeah. I mean, as athletic as 6'4", as linemen get, right? Which kind of leads into my story. Unlike you, I grew up in a very football dominant area with tons of athletes, and I was not the best athlete of my group. Okay. I think if you would have put me in some small school in the middle of nowhere, like there probably would have been a good chance that I would have played quarterback or been able to be more of an athletic position. Because it's funny, like I'll walk through the positions and then I'll go back to the stories. Like, tried to play quarterback, was a center in 7th grade. Okay. In 8th grade, got moved to guard. Tried out for quarterback both of those years. Tried out again my freshman.
You say you're trying out for quarterback like the fucking dude from the Adam Sandler movie?
100%, dude. 100%. I tried out for quarterback. Okay. Like, it wasn't, like, looking back on it, like, it's embarrassing because tried to play quarterback my freshman year, played tight end. Okay. And in freshman, you're like, okay, now I'm starting to establish like where I'm at. Like, maybe I should know my role. Like, start to get acclimated with this. Tried out again my JV year.
And nobody's telling you like, hey, this isn't a good idea.
It took a week my JV year for the coach to be like, Heath, you're going to be our tight end. Like go back to the tight end group.
And how tall? What was your stature? How big were you at this point?
I was always like one of the taller ones. I think freshman year I was still coming into my own, 6'1". Sophomore year I was probably 6'2", and then I rounded out about 6'3", 6'3.5". I didn't get to 6'4" until college.
But you were more slender, you'd say, because you went from being guard
I would say husky.
to tight end.
I would say husky, like not exactly big, like I wasn't fat by any means, but like definitely like I looked like a high school tight end.
Okay, cool.
For sure. And heavy to be a quarterback at that time for like your traditional high school quarterback. Like I would have been definitely someone you looked at and been like, you know, why is that kid not playing tight end?
Okay.
Yeah.
So your coaches led you in the right direction then?
Yes, definitely. I mean, now, to my defense, I have a good arm. So
I can corroborate that.
Yeah, so like that, and that was the only thing that I was going off of. And we had really athletic quarterback in high school. But so I'll continue on the journey here. Tight end my JV year. We go in now. At the time, we had a really good linebacker tight end. He ended up getting a scholarship to Boise, and he went up. He was playing linebacker for varsity when I was JV. So when we moved up to varsity the next year, they started to let him go both ways and play linebacker tight end. So they moved me back to offensive line. I was a tackle.
Okay.
And
by the way, this isn't a football podcast, but we will lose all of our female followers in the first 11 minutes of it. We'll get back to the other shit.
All right, cool. Yeah. So anyways, long story short, I'm a lineman. Then I get to college, and this whole time I didn't mention I'm a long snapper, which is a specialty position, and where you snap the ball to the guy who holds it for the kicker or the punter. And, you know, it's really like it's kind of like a kicker or punter specialty thing that you can get into a college with. And that was kind of my behind the scenes focus. Like, I'm going to go long snap.
When did you know that you wanted to play college football?
Probably always. I've always professional football. So college was just like a means to an end.
Right.
But as soon as I became very good at long snapping, I started going to like long snapping camps. It sounded weird then, it sounds weird now. But this guy puts out people. And I was ranked number 2 at the time. And I was getting like walk-on offers.
When was this? Like what age?
My junior year going into senior year. I was getting walk-on offers from big schools like UW, Boise. And at the time, that was the year before they beat Oklahoma. So they were just coming up, having really good time. So Arizona State, but there was a few, it was all walk-ons. And I had 2 younger brothers, and Sac State was the only team that offered me that.
But, so you always knew you wanted to play professional football, college football. At any point in your younger years before you went to Sac State, was there ever a time that you felt like you couldn't? Like, was there ever a time that you were like, maybe I'm not cut out for this, maybe it's not going to happen? Basically,
I think,
zero to like 12th grade. Was it like, this isn't for me?
Yes, but it was for the athletic side of the game, because I really wanted to not be just a long snapper.
Okay.
I wanted to be a tight end. I wanted to be, the quarterback dream had died by now.
So you were thinking like, maybe I don't have what it takes to play tight end at the next level, but like maybe I can get in as a long snapper. Yeah,
and that was a little shot to the pride at that time because, I played with 3 or 4 other guys who had college level talent, 2 who actually got scholarships right out of high school, 2 more who ended up playing college at some point as well.
Yeah.
But we were really good. I mean, we lost 2 games in 4 years. We were freaking...
Okay, subtle flex. Yeah. See, I had a different... I guess I didn't have reality on my side. I was the first person to get a scholarship since 2002, so like 7-year gap, right? My family didn't know football, didn't know recruiting. My coach didn't really know it. And so as soon as I hit like sophomore year, when I starting on varsity and getting all these accolades, I was just like, same as you, like, oh, I'm going to go to college regardless. Like, I always just assumed that I'd get a scholarship at that point. It wasn't until I got to college and I had to redshirt that I was like, oh, fuck, man, like, maybe I'm not as good as I thought, right? That's when you kind of have that, like, identity crisis a bit. But anyway, continue. So you were number 2 long snapper, figuring it out, overcoming these hurdles, really having to check your ego. You were surrounded by a ton of other good football players, right? I had good football players on my team, but like there wasn't a ton of like recruits, right? There's good high school, and this is what people do not understand, is that there is good high school players in your area, then there's good high school players in good football areas, then there's good high school players in really good football areas, and then there's college players.
Oh yeah.
And then there's NAIA, Division III, Division
Yeah.
II, 1AA, 1A.
Yeah.
And then within 1A, there's the SEC.
And
right?
every once in a while you get that one guy where it's like he's going to be a pro.
Right.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when we played, I don't know if you ever played, you didn't play with Todd, my buddy TD. He came on, and within like the first couple months of him being there, I was like, oh, this kid's going to play. He has the ability to play at the next level. Or like DeAndre, he was all of 5'9", 5'10", squatting 405 pounds as a freshman, playing receiver. I was like, oh, this kid is has the ability to play. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we've seen all of it, has the mental to play, right?
Yep.
But a little bit different. But anyway, so like you don't really know till you're exposed to that. I played in a very small area. You could have played quarterback in my high school. That's for damn sure, because I played quarterback. And then I came to Sacramento, and the competition up here is way better, right? So you were winning games against good schools up here. So your league was better than mine, candidly. But your journey, you didn't only have good players at your school, but you had good athletes in your family, right? So how did that kind of like, because it had to start at a young age, right?
Oh, yeah.
You guys are all big dudes, extremely competitive. Do you feel like that helped? Was it only sports that you guys competed in, or is it other things in life?
I think, yeah, maybe not academics, like maybe more so.
You guys
like,
all fucking dumb?
No, we're not dumb, but like I think actually,
you have your MBA, by the way.
I take it back. We would definitely. It wasn't your standard competition like, hey, what are you getting on that grade or on that thing tomorrow? It was like when you did bad, it was like, you know, just like football, like, dude, you messed up on that again, like, or dude, you got an F, like, pull it together, you know. But besides that, like, yeah, sports all day, every day. Even things that people wouldn't consider sports, like running up a hill, like it was constant competition. Who could shovel the most, you know, into this wheelbarrow? It was always a competition.
So you grew up with three brothers. What's the age range for you guys? Like how?
So yeah, I'm. Shit, what am I now? 34, and then my brother's 33. We're Irish twins, and then the youngest one is gonna be 29 this year. 28 right now. So,
three brothers, all pretty close. You guys grew up in a small town. Everybody knows your family, like you're the Heath brothers, right? But even dating back further than that, your parents. So your dad was older when he had you guys, right?
Oh, yeah.
What was that like? People always say this, right? So it's like, everybody's like, oh, I want to be a young dad so I can be involved in my kids' lives and all this kind of stuff. Is that fucking true at all? Because based on the stories you've told me, your dad was extremely involved in your guys' athletic careers, your guys' life.
For sure.
Regardless of his age.
He was definitely a sideline coach, and I think that helped 100%. Like, dude, if he wasn't there, like, I think that would have been demoralizing. But there's definitely the disappointment of, like, hey, Dad, like, you know, come play catch with us. And, you know, he can't, like, his shoulder hurts, or he's, you know, throwing like a ref.
So that is a thing.
Him. Yeah, no, definitely.
How old was your dad when you guys were born?
He was 49 technically, but like turned 50 a month after I was born.
Okay.
So he's 50 years older than me, and I have two younger brothers. Passed away when he was 76. I was 26, and but yet, dude, it's having the brothers definitely helps because that's what keeps you active. You have, you know, it's like getting a dog and another dog, right?
Yeah.
So they're able to, like, you know, keep each other busy, but you still want your dad to come out and join with you and be a part of it. So that part was a little hard, but he was so involved on every single day. You know, it got to a certain point. He was like, Dad, go inside. Like, we don't need you coaching. Like,
right. You know. And he got to be there for your guys' high school and at least your college career, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe not Zach's full college career?
Not Zach's. He was there for mine and Jason's, my middle brother.
And that's an interesting thing, right? Because that's something that you shared with him. Mm-hmm. That's something that he was obviously proud of, and you were proud to do that for him.
Yeah, dude.
You, I would say, I don't know the numbers on it, but I'll go as far to say is that you're more of the exception, because I think that most athletes are guys like me, that dads aren't in the picture, that dads are gone. So it's like, who are we really playing for? I know I had the most supportive mom. My mom, when I was a fucking redshirt freshman, got like tailgate of the game sometimes, you know, like my mom was driving from Sonoma County, you know, so I would play for her. I'd play for my family in that way. But like growing up, I was band nerd. I was first clarinet, by the way. So I was
hey,
you know, I'd have gone that route. I've been first clarinet.
I was more brass team, but I feel you.
Brass is definitely the manlier of the two. We'll say that much. But it's interesting because like I didn't have that like masculine push towards sports. I didn't have anybody that was like, I want to see my son play or be like me. Like my stepdad didn't play sports growing up. He ran cross country. I'm pretty sure he was a little skinny redhead that ran. So I didn't have anybody that was like, I hope that my son, I didn't have a sideline coach. That's for damn sure. My parents still don't know what a first down is, I'm sure. So it's interesting though, because like different things drive different people, right? So I'm trying to make someone proud, not because I want to like follow in their footsteps. I'm trying to make them proud for a different reason. Your dad was very involved in, and probably even your mom too, to an extent, your playing career at the high school and college level. But a lot of people are out there playing sports for people that I won't say don't give a shit about them, but like my dad never saw one of my football games. Actually, never saw any sports played. I haven't seen my dad since I was 6. I started playing baseball when I was 5. So he missed out on my entire life and playing career. Through therapy, I found out that a lot of the reason why I continue to move the goalpost and continue to strive for bigger and better things is so that I can make someone proud of me that never really gave a shit, for lack of a better term. But it's just interesting how like, I heard Pat McAfee say back when like all this civil distress is going on in the United States, that America needs to act a lot more like a football locker room. And that is that you'll get a guy from South Florida, from Alabama, from Colfax, from Loomis, from San Francisco and San Diego and Kentucky, and you throw them all into a locker room and they don't give a shit about where anybody's from.
They embrace it.
Yeah, exactly. It's we're all, you know where we're from? We're all from this locker room.
Yeah.
We learn about each other's cultures, right? I can't tell you how many times I know our buddy that was an almond farmer that was putting on a do-rag from a dude that was from Compton.
Dude,
you know?
I can't tell you how many times I took someone from an urban area and took them out to a rural area, my country town, and having them look around like, this is where you came from? Like, yeah, 100%, dude. And that's what it's about. Like, dude, I also went out to dinners, like went over to people's houses. Like it's all, that's what it's about, is getting to embrace. And especially for me, someone coming from the country, dude, that was my first time ever living outside of the house. Like I learned real quick, like what other cultures were like, and definitely like different mannerisms and how to talk to different people, respect in different cultures as well.
Sure.
Like it's really eye-opening.
It is. And I think that most of like the reasons why people, I don't know, we'll talk about, you call it racism or just like prejudice or whatever. I think it also comes from the lack of perspective, right? I think that somebody that's been such in their bubble their entire life casts judgment on somebody that lives in a completely different part of the United States, that grew up with a completely different lens and set of experiences than somebody else did. And I think that, like, candidly, I grew up with a white mom. My dad left when I was 6 because I'm half black, half white. And so I didn't grow up with a lot of black culture. I grew up with Italian culture, right? And where I grew up is basically white and Mexican. And then I go to Sac State, and it was my first time having like, not even just like a ton more black friends, but like engulfed in black culture. Like one of my really good friends in college, I just texted him, it was his birthday a couple days ago. He was from Compton. He went to 3 different schools because he got kicked out of a couple of them. And he grew up around a lot of the 60 Crips, 60 block. And we're just fucking kids, man. And he would tell me, he's like, this is how it is in Long Beach. This is how it is in Compton. This is how it is whatever. And you know what we would do? We'd share stories from there. share stories from here. His family would come up. I'd meet his family. He'd meet my family. We'd all have that. And then we'd go to a party at this country dude's house and we'd just goof on each other because we're not too insensitive or too sensitive that it is. And it's just crazy because, like, I think that lack of exposure is what causes a lot of people to just cast judgment. Like, at the end of the day, you strip everybody of all their shit. They're just people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think going back to what you said, even, there's so much more to a person than just that father figure idol that pushes them to be sports, or even the mom when it takes it upon themselves. I think that you kind of turn yourself into a mission when you go on to do something bigger than what you're accustomed to, or something different from like your peers when you leave high school on scholarship, or when you just take a mission upon yourself. And whether it's for your family, for your mom, like, I think that there's very few people who you're talking about who have no support system that make it that far. I mean, at least I haven't heard too much about them.
Generally you have.
But if, usually someone like has a mom, or they had to take care of their 7 brothers and sisters. Like, someone, they usually develop, like, there's like some sort of mission that's built into it. So, and their idols are, football players, or maybe even, local community, older football players, or just someone who means a lot to them and who's like, you should get into this sport.
Right.
So I think that, like, having a testament to you is you had that support system. You had a cheerleader.
Right.
You may not have had a coach, but you had a cheerleader.
Right.
And that support is in itself just like so huge for you to want to go out and accomplish things, whether it's for yourself or for her, or a means to an end by accomplishing something bigger. I think that, like, finding that mission, as we do with everything in life, like, it's so big. And for someone young who's gone through adversity like that to find it, I think that shit's huge. Like, I think those are some of the strongest people, and those young athletes who have overcome adversity already, and they're 17, 18 years old, and then they go on to, make millions of dollars. It's just a plus for them.
Right. And so somebody that's, I mean, all adversity is different, right? What they call it, like, first world problems, because there's shit that people have gone through that's 20 times harder than I'll ever go through, but it's all relative, and it's all about your perspective, because I don't know, there's some stuff that I've dealt with could seem so trivial to someone else. And you see it, like, the idea of having your starting job taken away to somebody that never played football, doesn't care about football. Like, they say, oh, it's just a game, go do something else. Like, at 20 years old, getting packages and plays taken away from me. That's something that happened at one point in my career. I was like, I got to figure out how to get it back, because it kind of shakes you to your core, right? Because you look at yourself, you're like, how could I let this happen? This is unfair. It's embarrassing. Is it me? Is it the coaches? And at the same time, this is why sports is so fucking hard. You got to look at the guy, because the guy who took your plays away, let alone if he took your entire job away, is your friend, is your brother, is somebody that they're in your position group. You're with them 90% of the day at practice, right? People don't realize that at practice, there's offensive practice and defensive practice. I played linebacker, so I would be with the other 7 linebackers, and we were all competing for 2 spots, 3 spots maybe. And so the guys that were my brothers that I was cheering on to get better and do all this kind of stuff, these are the people that directly affected my playing time, my livelihood, a lot of my identity. And when you lose your job to them, it sucks, because you gotta cheer them on. Yeah. You gotta look at yourself internally, and that's why I think as an adult I became relatively more successful, because I've had the humility of knowing, like, hey, when something went awry, I'm able to look and be like, hey, what is my part in this, right? Because anytime anything bad happened to me in my athletic career, I'm like, I can't blame the coaches. I can't blame the other player. Like, everybody out here is trying to do the best for themselves, because at the end of the day, we're one unit trying to win games. So it's my shortcomings that put me in this position. So I don't know if you've had that in your career. Like, I always say, like, there are so many ebbs and flows in the athletic career. Like, it is one of the scariest things about sports is the idea of getting hurt, and not getting hurt because you're afraid like, oh, this is going to hurt, but because every play that you don't play, there's somebody chomping at the bit to take your position.
All right.
We've seen it. I mean, people would know, like the Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady doesn't play. Tom Brady doesn't have the career of Drew Bledsoe, doesn't get hurt, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like kind of crazy how these things happen. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that are happy that Drew, and so this is the vicious thing. Like a lot of people happy that Drew Bledsoe got hurt because we got to see Tom Brady's career. I don't think that people give young athletes enough credit about like how mentally strong you have to be. It's not just about like training to play a game, but like it teaches you so much about life in general, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, have you ever felt or have you ever dealt with anything like similar? Everybody's story is a little bit different, you know, but like, you didn't get to play quarterback.
Right. Well, I mean, application to the real world. I mean, I actually wholeheartedly believe in that. I believe it. I think it's a thought process that isn't translated enough from football. It's not too often where, like in an office, an accountant, you know, gets a carpal tunnel surgery and like they come back to work and to no job, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, maybe a temp gets hired or someone else takes on a bigger payload, and then your job is there when you come back to it. And it's really, especially for a young man, it's one of the first times where like your ego, your vulnerability, your identity, a lot of things are challenged in you, and you're taught to. I should back up. There's a lot that has to do with who you are as a person as well, and seeing that as a challenge, a chance for improvement, or maybe even ownership. Like I'm not doing a good enough job improving. Yeah. And I think like the hardest pill to swallow, and I think for most kids, is just looking at like a superior athlete and just being like, I could train every day and I will never be that person. But it's okay to be yourself and what you're good at and get good at what's in your capabilities, right?
Yeah, and that's why there's not a ton of that in the corporate world, because everybody's like, anybody can be a good accountant. Yeah. Anybody can be a good data analyst or whatever. Yeah. Right? But like, there is certain guys who can bull rush the fuck out of a tight end and a tackle, and like they're impossible to block, and you're never gonna be 290 running a 4.4, right? So it's like there are certain guys who are Julius Peppers, who are Vernon Davis, right? Vernon Davis is a gifted athlete that was running a 4.3, right? And so that is not something that most people have to deal with. I will say, so like starting a company yourself, and we can even go back to the fruition of Helios, the company that you co-founded. I still remember the day that I was sitting out on my buddy's porch. You called me and you're like, all right, Cody, so like we need help marketing. Like me and Jimmy and Zach, like we're going to buy a bunch of trucks and we're going to get a bunch of like armed guards and we're just going to drive weed up and down California because it's about to be legal. I was like, Brian, you're fucking high right now. I'm not listening to you. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Fast forward a month. You're like, hey, Cody, we've made a decent amount of money in it was literally the first 30 days. You're like, we made a good amount of money. I think we have an actual viable business. And then that's when I came on board, which was 2017?
At that point, no. At that point, it would have been 2019.
It was December. You showed me December to January numbers.
December was the very first time that we did business. December of 18.
So it would have been January. I remember it was January 21st.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's been a couple years now. You know, since the actual inception of the business, 2017, been 5 years. Okay. Going on 6 here this summer. But
to my point is, obviously you want to hire people that have the same philosophy and work ethic or whatever. But like, do you feel, you started the company with all athletes. Do you feel like athletes have something special about them?
Absolutely.
When it comes to the business world.
Yeah. There's a certain camaraderie and togetherness and team mentality that is translated over to the workplace. I think that comes with really anyone that goes through adverse situations as a group. Okay. but at least for what we were familiar with at the time, we really wanted to give back to our fellow teammates, but also that was kind of that's what's required in the business that we were going into, which is distribution. You need to have a team mentality, everyone operating towards the same goal, towards the same service that we provide. Like, we all need to know what the end goal is. So yeah, absolutely. And we even have a saying that says we train our players to be coaches, which means that like we move up. Like, if you're doing well enough at your job, we need you to take on a little bit more responsibility. We'll move you up to that next role.
Right.
Like, we want people who have been in that position to be in another position to coach the new people that come in.
Same.
Much like what you're talking about. Like, when there's a difference between being confident in coaching someone because you care about them and knowing the difference between like coaching someone to like take your position, right?
Right.
And I think it's having that confidence just to know that you're putting in the work as well. And if things happen, like they take your job. But in most scenarios, that doesn't happen. But that's in business, it definitely doesn't happen.
Because in our business and even the other companies that I've ran and currently run, if you teach someone how to do your job so well, they don't take your job. We move you up to manage them, right? We become that much more efficient.
Right.
Versus in sports, right? Like, you teach someone how to do like inside placement hands to control the block. Maybe that person just becomes that much better than you. There's a finite number of positions, right? And it is just, I don't know. I think that athletes possess a lot of the attributes to be the best employees or business owners or managers because of the work ethic, the adversity, the attitude that you have to bring to work every day, especially in today's work climate and work culture. It's
next
like
play mentality. You
right.
gotta have it.
Now people, especially over the last few years, like work 2 hours in an 8-hour day, right? And then they just kind of fuck off for the rest of the time.
Yep.
But it is just like, you talked about coaching. It's something that I wanted to touch on, something that I've always thought about. And at a young age, you're kind of put into a position where you have to trust that these people who are coaching you know what's best for you. You have to make sure that your vision, your goals are aligned. And because you have to assume that what's best for them, it will be best for you, will be best for the team, will be best for the next recruits, because you're trying to create this lineage, you're trying to create this thing that's bigger than you. And it really starts like if you're like a kid, right? You always just inherently trust your parents because you're like, hey, they want what's best for me, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't have parents that do that, right?
Yeah.
We fortunately grew up with parents that did do that. Then you meet this guy or girl now that's your football coach, and he's like, hey, I'm going to put you at this position because it's best for you. It happened to you in high school. It happened to me in high school. And you're like, I guess, like, is that true? Like, maybe. A lot of times if you have a good coach, it is. But sometimes you run into positions, and coaches are put in between a rock and a hard place too, where they're doing what's best for them, not necessarily best for you. We've seen guys that we played with a guy that was the best player at his position on the team. But for one reason or another, politics, or the coach just had a vendetta against him, not only didn't play him, but started playing him at other positions almost in spite of. I don't know
like
the full story.
Practice team positions?
Yeah.
Are we talking about? I love you, bro.
And it's just kind of crazy because I remember being so young looking at that. And this is the other thing. You as a business owner, me as a business owner, how I treat each employee, other employees are looking around.
Yeah.
So me at 18 years old, I looked at that and I was like, I had to make one of two decisions. Either that player is a big shithead and like he is getting what's kind of deserved of him, or this coach really isn't doing what's best for the team. And I, based on my personal belief, from that moment on, from when I was 19 years old, I was like, this coach doesn't possess the emotional intelligence to coach a head football team. Would be the head coach of a Division I college football team.
I would agree.
And that doesn't mean he's a bad person. That doesn't mean a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
But it just meant that at that time, I figured out that this coach didn't want to do what it took to make something bigger than him. And we just went through our record one of the year that we played together, and then some of the other years. And I forgot that I would say 50% of the games that I lost my entire college career were within one score. Mm-hmm. And the culture starts with the head coach and comes down. Culture starts with the CEO, the founders, whoever it is, and comes down. And the 100%. Shitty thing is like we are told as employees, as players, as people to just instill trust in the people that are directing us. And a lot of people out there aren't fit to be trusting. Because that one example, that at that time, young man went on to have an illustrious career playing professional football at the position that he should have been playing, right? And still is, right? I'd love to get him on the podcast sometime so he could talk about his ebbs and flows, right? Because probably one of the most mentally strong people that I've met, right? If you think about that, going through that. But it's just interesting because it's like, man, like it always sucks when you see a group of men trust this one person implicitly and then come to find out that they just weren't doing right by them, even though they looked you in the eyes and they were like, hey, I'm going to do right by you. And so that's why me as a business owner now, I'm like, it is my duty to not just, I don't own the trust of people right out the gate. I earn their trust, and then I got to keep it and show them each and every day why they should trust me. And I think that you do that as well with Helios, with the company that you own. And I guess the one positive that came out of the situation that we were in college is that I saw how not to do it, and it made me want to do the opposite.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think you can probably agree, at least that's the kind of the way that we teach is like never ask somebody to do something that you wouldn't do.
Right.
Now, being the owner, you would do a lot for your company or a founder. So it definitely separates you, but being present, being an operator, being there on the floor around the daily operations, every once in a while getting your hands dirty on like the normal operations just to like kind of clean things up, because we did it. We started bootstrap. The three of us, we went from 3 to 23 people. Right. You know, like we were literally shifting the main jobs and positions in like you drive this time, I'll package, you call that person, I'll do these QuickBooks. Like, you know, it was just a consistent shifting, and we slowly over time, you know, found the key roles that we needed people to be put in place and taught them how to do it. But we're coming from a place of, hey, I've done this before. This is how it worked for me. You make it your own, but this is how, at the very baseline, what needs to be done. And kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier is that when you are coaching someone up, you almost need to start and treat them like a child, not necessarily like baby them, but like start with little nuanced things, right? Like, hey, make it easier for the next man, or just little tiny improvements and sayings like that, almost like where it leads them into kind of the culture and the way that you guys think. And it's these little breadcrumbs that they pick up of...
You're building a foundation, just like if you were raising a child.
100%.
You don't try to teach them math out the gate. You teach them how to be a good person. You have to build the foundation, the small building blocks, like you're saying, in order for them to be successful. Right.
So make it easier for the next man turns into, you know, hey, we need to have this ready before this person comes in the next day. And then it turns into, you know, that person taking charge and printing out paperwork and knowing what it is. And the next step is that person coaching the next person that comes in. Hey, make it easier for the next man. I'll teach you all the other stuff along the way. And just like kind of having that baseline culture set.
Do you feel like it's always imperative that you give someone a why? We're constantly delegating, handing out tasks or whatever. Not often that people like question, but like I know that like when I played, it was important for me to understand why my job was my why my job what it was, right? Like why am I skiff off to, like where does this fit into our defensive front? Because I know on defense, it's a team responsibility, right? So like I fit this gap, they fit this gap, the other person's doing all of it, and I can see how it all plays out. Like, have you ever like sat down with the warehouse and been like, hey, like it's super important that you do this so that everything else operates appropriately? Or do you feel like sometimes you just get in plays where it's just kind of like plug and play? Like, do people always need to know why? Is that like on a case-by-case basis?
I think that it's always important to understand the why. I think that in some situations, there's maybe emergency situations where you don't have time to explain the why.
Of course.
But yes, absolutely. I think that it's always important that they understand the why. And that's actually kind of the why comes, I think, almost at the next step, because when people first start something, a position, a role, a job, whatever, it's drinking from a fire hose. So the little stuff helps as they learn all the other things. And then I think once they are able to take a breath and then you explain the why, they have enough background information on all the other stuff they're doing that they're able to put together that puzzle piece. So I like to personally explain why it's for situational, like you're talking about, but I also, I have my own personal interest in people's why.
Right.
I actually do like to ask people at our warehouse, hey, what is it that you want to do? Where do you see yourself being in life? Because I like to draw comparisons between whatever they're doing in the warehouse or within our business to what it is that they want to do. And it actually helps them create a new why in my mind, or at least, how I see it, because now they're working towards their own future. Right. And they're learning skills while they're at our job that actually is creating more purpose for their overall life and where they're headed next.
Because people are always, just like you said, you mentioned before, like nobody's going to work as hard as you for your business than you are, right? Mm-hmm. But if people have a why, if you understand what their why is, and maybe they're going to work that much harder in their role so they can get to that next point. Yep. One bit, and to sum it up, because we're going to end here pretty soon, if you could give one piece of advice to somebody starting a company, doesn't matter what vertical or industry or whatever it is, what would it be? One piece of advice to somebody starting a business. Coming from a man that has started a business for over half a decade now with his MBA.
I'm trying to think of something that's not cliche, because all the cliches are true.
Right.
But if you had to choose one that was like most important, it's like you be strategic. I think that's the best way. Like, you can be hard, you can work hard, you can do all the BS in between, but you got to have that plan. You got to write it down. You got to be strategic. Strategy can be big, it can be small, but having the strategy, being strategic, being pinpointed, either in your sales or your product or your services, and then applying all the other stuff, all the other cliches.
Yeah, I agree, because at my agency, one of the things that we do is we help businesses scale, and we help companies put together strategies, because a lot of times people come with me ideas and they come to me and they say like, hey, we want to do this, 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 and this. And I say like, hey, this is the strategy that we should implement, because I feel like this will get you to where you want to be the fastest, right? Somebody will come to me and like, hey, should we do TV ads? I'm like, well, you're not going to see the best ROI for that right now. Mm-hmm. So that would be a bad strategy, because it's going to bankrupt you in 6 months or whatever it is. And the last thing that I want to touch on, which is a big topic and probably will go on to another podcast, is how do you feel being a business owner affects not only your romantic relationships, but your personal relationships as well? Do you feel like there's always a positive, or is there a positive and negative? Because I know that for me personally, balancing has been a huge thing that's been tougher, but I think you get better as you get the reps in, right? But also at the same time, being a business owner has allowed people to see a side of me that's maybe more attractive, because they're like, oh, like I support him, he's a go-getter. Like my mom still thinks I'm a fucking Instagram model, but but I have friends but I have friends that are like, hey, you know what, like I want to be around you because you're X, Y, and Z. So my question to you is there's obviously a positive and negative to all it, but like in your personal experience, do you feel like owning a business is good or bad for personal, romantic, and like non-romantic relationships? Possibly a loaded question, but
true. No, It's good if it's handled the right. It's both, right?
Right.
It just depends on how you handle it. I am a personal attestation to continuing to get better. I still fail with, like, especially the time management part, which I'm really trying to work on. Like, you know, a certain point of the day, turn the phone over and, you know, give dedicated time and mindfulness to significant others, because that's probably the biggest thing is, like, being mindful of the other things that you need to be mindful of, whether it's, you know, being responsible for your family, for your body, for your mind, sleep, which contributes to body, but, like, just not being scatterbrained. And so I had to learn that, and I started off being terrible, and now I think that the balance and therapy and understanding myself and knowing my downfalls and where to get better at, I think that really helped everything. And now I embrace it. It's just about time management at this point. But before, I had to draw the borders between, you know, work and home life 100%. And it's been a battle. But yeah.
Would you say, based on what you said, that it's extremely important that someone does the work on themselves and becomes self-aware prior to starting a business? Because I know for myself personally, I didn't know how I acted under stress. I knew I acted under different sorts of stress, but I didn't necessarily know, like, my priorities, how I acted under stress and all these different things prior to starting a business. And it costed me relationships. It costed me years of neglecting my family, really. You know, like, I wasn't a present son. I'll never be a present brother. You know, like, and I can kind of stroke you a little bit right here. You're an extremely present son. I mean, you're going to your grandfather's right after this. You're always gardening with your grandfather. Like, you're making time, and maybe you didn't in your late 20s, right? You know, and you really kind of find out what's important, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's part of the sacrifice. Those people sacrifice. I think you definitely have to communicate in the beginning, but so that they understand the sacrifice that they're about to take. And but they do sacrifice for you. And I think that it's not making excuses for yourself once you start to get a little bit of air, and then repaying those people for the sacrifices that they made and being diligent about it. I think that's the key. Some people choose to have non-negotiables when they start. I was of the traditional mindset, like, I'm going to put my head down and work and grind for the next 3 years. And it definitely affected all of my relationships, where I know people who handled it much differently. It's like, I'm going to work on my new business at this point in time, you know, the whole 4-hour work week, like, for 2 hours after every day, I'm going to do this, and then it's back to my normal life, and they found time for it. Mine, I did not manage it that, and I had to come to learn how to, you know, manage my time, and really mindfulness was my biggest thing, because could sit here and phone goes off, and, you know, I could be cliche with the ADD, but it's true. It's my attention span is not where it needed to be, for sure.
And I guess we'll kind of leave people with that, but that is a much larger topic that I think that there's no right way, right? Because, I mean, I guess if you dumped 100% of yourself into a business, got a divorce, fucking stop talking to your parents, and then your business didn't work out, that was the wrong decision, right? But there is something about just taking a chance on yourself, but while also still understanding the sacrifice that others have to make around you. But we'll get into another one. We're almost at an hour.
Thank you, sir.
Brian, we didn't even talk about how you've done a TED Talk. We didn't even talk about any of the other accolades, but let people know where they can find you on social or whatever.
Well, Instagram is at Mr. B _ Heath, Heath. Okay.
Like the bar?
Yeah, like the candy bar. Pretty much everywhere is my name, Brian Heath, with an I. Yeah, that's pretty much it, man. The Helios the Helios Company is the name of our company. It's a distribution company, and and go check out the TED Talk. That's actually TEDx Talk, and it's called Hire to Fire. But yeah, thanks, man. Really appreciate doing this. I'm looking forward to hopefully doing some more here soon.
Awesome, man. Well, you know where we're at. Follow Cuts, buy Cuts Clothing.